The stars hung quietly in the black sea of space. To most, it was nothing more than darkness, endless, cold, and empty. But to her it felt alive. Every shimmer, every faint pulse of light carried whispers of something older than time itself. She stood before the wide glass of the viewing deck, watching those distant suns drift like glowing embers, and wondered if somewhere out there, someone else was watching her too. She was not an ordinary traveler. She was the daughter of the Lissari Dominion's ruling line, raised among diplomacy, traditions, and silence. The Lissari were known for their elegance, their shimmering silver cities, and their ability to keep order across dozens of star systems. But peace always came with secrets. And lately she could feel that something was wrong behind all that calm. Her fleet floated along the outer border, a calm region known as the Silent Frontier. Their mission was simple: watch the edges of known space, where the older civilizations once existed before the Great Collapse. Most of the young officers saw it as punishment duty, guarding emptiness. But she didn't mind the quiet. It allowed her to think. Every night she listened to the hum of the ship, the faint murmur of engines that had been running for decades, and she'd close her eyes, wondering what it was like before the collapse, before the Lissari became the dominant voice of the stars. Old data records mentioned a species that once stood beside them. They called themselves humans, but to most Lissari, humans were myths now, like stories told to children about the ancient wars. The princess, however, wasn't satisfied with myths. One morning, as the fleet drifted near a faint gas cloud, she was reviewing routine transmission scans. Rows of static data scrolled down the console. Her technician, a quiet and nervous young officer, hesitated before speaking. "Highness, we're getting strange signals again. Same frequencies as yesterday. Interference?" she asked softly. "Maybe. But the pattern repeats every 6 seconds. That's not natural." She leaned closer, adjusting the visual display. The signal was faint, a broken rhythm, uneven but deliberate. Her eyes narrowed. It wasn't random noise. It felt like someone was trying to speak through the stars, but the message had been traveling so long it arrived in pieces. She ordered the technicians to filter it through the translation matrix. The crew waited in silence as the machine processed it. Then a few distorted words appeared on the screen. "Terra, command. This is station." The room froze. Nobody spoke. They all recognized the ancient tongue, human language, a language believed lost for over 400 years. The technician swallowed hard. "Could be an old echo, Highness. Maybe an artifact from before the collapse." She didn't respond. Her fingers brushed the screen, tracing the faded letters. Something inside her chest tightened. If this was real, it meant humans weren't completely gone. Somewhere out there, remnants of their world might still exist. She ordered further scans, but her advisors protested. "Highness," said the fleet captain respectfully, "with all due respect, humans are gone. Their worlds were abandoned. We've monitored this sector for decades. No trace of intelligent activity remains." "Then explain the signal," she replied quietly. The captain hesitated, then sighed. "Perhaps it's an automated system still transmitting. Debris, nothing more." She looked back out the window at the endless dark. "Even echoes have origins," she murmured. Later, in her private quarters, she opened the restricted archives. The Dominion had kept records sealed for generations, claiming it was to prevent panic. But she had access, and curiosity stronger than fear. The files revealed fragments of the Great Coalition War. It was the conflict that ended most of the older civilizations, including humanity. She read through the reports slowly. They spoke of a species that refused to surrender even when outnumbered, a people who built warships so powerful that entire fleets vanished trying to fight them. The Lissari once fought beside humans, the document said, until politics turned allies into enemies. The final entries described the humans vanishing after the fall of Earth. No survivors, no signals, nothing. But now, the faint message she'd heard didn't fit that story. She sat in silence for a long time, feeling the low vibration of the ship beneath her feet. What if her people hadn't told the full truth? What if the humans hadn't been destroyed, only waiting? The following days passed in tense quiet. The signal grew stronger, clearer. This time the transmission carried coordinates. Her officers didn't want to follow them, fearing it might be a trap or a malfunction, but the princess insisted they investigate, at least with probes. One by one, they launched the tiny silver scouts into the void. For hours, there was no response. Then suddenly, a probe returned visual data, an image of what looked like an enormous shadow drifting among the stars. Its shape was impossible to mistake for natural debris. Long, sharp, built for war, the bridge fell silent again. The technicians checked for errors, but there were none. The image showed something built by human hands. When the data reached the Dominion Council, their reply was short and cold. Do not engage. Do not interfere. The border must remain secure. Her father's signature sealed the order. She understood his fear. The Lasari government didn't like mysteries, especially ones that could challenge their history, but she couldn't ignore it. That night, standing again before the glass wall, she imagined the forgotten world called Earth, the place that started everything. How could a civilization capable of shaping galaxies simply disappear? There had to be something left, some truth buried beneath centuries of silence. A distant memory stirred in her. As a child, she had once asked her tutor about humans. The old scholar had smiled sadly and said, "They burned bright, but too quickly. Their fire frightened the stars." At the time, she thought it was just poetry. Now she wasn't sure. The next morning, she ordered her ship to change course slightly. Not enough to violate orders, but close enough to keep the mysterious coordinates within scanning range. Her crew obeyed quietly. None of them wanted to speak aloud what they were thinking. Hours passed. The scan showed nothing but drifting dust and fragments of old stations. Then, almost like a heartbeat, a pulse appeared on the radar. Once, twice, 3 times. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. It was deliberate. Someone, or something, was watching them back. Her pulse quickened. "Focus all sensors on that signal," she commanded. The image on the screen flickered, distorted by interference. For a second, she thought she saw movement. A faint outline of a massive hull gliding through the dark, as if the stars themselves were shifting. Then, without warning, the signal vanished completely. Silence returned. But the feeling didn't fade. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every sound of the ship felt louder. The faint hiss of the air filters, the soft hum of the engines. Her thoughts raced between curiosity and fear. If humans still existed, what did they want? Were they rebuilding? Or had they come back for something else? She opened her datapad and played the recovered transmission again. The words were broken, but she imagined the voice behind them, a tired voice calling out into an empty universe, hoping someone would hear. Maybe that was the saddest part, not knowing if the message was a warning, a memory, or a cry for help. Far beyond the border, deep in the shadows of uncharted space, something ancient moved, and no deliberate, patient. But she didn't know that yet. All she knew was that the silence of the void didn't feel empty anymore. Something had awakened. As the stars shimmered faintly outside her window, she whispered softly to herself, "If they are out there, what will they think of us now?" The stars gave no answer, but for the first time in her life she felt small. Not because of fear, but because she finally realized that her people might not be alone. And maybe they never had been. The hum of the engines deepened, carrying her ship farther into the dark. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, young, uncertain, but determined. She didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of something that would change the galaxy's story forever. The days that followed were uneasy. Everyone on the ship felt it, though no one dared to say it out loud. It wasn't fear exactly, more like the sense that something ancient had stirred and now the air itself had changed. The princess could see it in her crew's faces. They spoke in shorter sentences, moved slower, and often glanced at the dark window screens as if expecting something to appear out there. She didn't blame them. Ever since the signal, the ship felt colder. The sound of the engines, normally a soft comfort, now echoed like a heartbeat that didn't belong to them. Still, she kept her calm. Every morning, she walked through the observation deck, reviewing reports and updates, pretending everything was routine. But deep down, her thoughts circled one truth she couldn't shake. The humans were not gone. Somewhere beyond the borders, they still existed. And if they did, what were they waiting for? She spent hours reading through ancient archives. The more she learned, the less sense it made. According to official history, humanity had destroyed itself. The Dominion's record said that humans were too ambitious, too reckless. They had built machines they couldn't control, fought wars that consumed entire systems. The Lasari Council claimed they tried to help them, but when humanity refused to surrender its weapons, the Council withdrew. Then the record simply ended there, saying humanity vanished during the Great Collapse. But the princess noticed something strange. Gaps. Entire sections of the archives were missing. Some entries had been edited. A few words were blacked out. It was as if someone had carefully rewritten history to hide what truly happened. She leaned back in her chair, feeling her heart race. What could be so dangerous about the truth that it had to be erased? That night she couldn't sleep. She wandered through the silent corridors, her reflection following her in the polished metal walls. The ship floated in near total darkness, only dim blue lights guiding her path. She passed the viewing deck and stopped. Beyond the glass, the stars burned quietly. Somewhere among them, a human signal had called to her ship, and she had answered. Now she wondered if something else might be watching back. She turned to leave, but one of her aides appeared holding a data pad. "Highness?" he whispered nervously. "We found something. You should see this." He handed her the pad. It contained a deep scan analysis of the sector. There was a faint trace of energy, unlike anything their sensors normally picked up. The signal wasn't constant, it flickered as though something massive was trying to stay hidden. "Where did this come from?" she asked. "Sector 9, he said. "The same area where the old transmission originated. We almost missed it. It's faint, but it's real." She studied the screen, watching the pulsing light. "It's a ship," she murmured, her aide swallowed. "Or what's left of one." For the first time in a long while, her hands trembled slightly. She had read stories about human ships. Powerful, heavy, built with strange alloys that could survive direct hits from energy blasts. But if this was one of them, it meant something impossible. The humans had survived long enough to rebuild. "Send word to the other captains," she ordered. "We'll investigate at first light." When dawn cycles began, the Lasari fleet moved toward the coordinates. The princess stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the growing dot in the center of the main screen. Slowly, the shape began to form, a dark silhouette against the star field, massive and still. As they got closer, her breath caught. It was a ship, but not like any Lasari design. Its surface was rough, scarred, and blackened, as though it had seen 1,000 battles. Its hull markings were faded, but a few letters could still be seen. UNSV, no one spoke. Even the hum of the engines felt quieter. "What does that mean?" one of the younger officers whispered. The princess didn't answer. She already knew. Those letters stood for United Nations Space Vessel, an ancient human designation. Her heart pounded. It was real. They scanned the ship for life signs, but nothing came up. No heat, no movement, no energy source. It looked dead, a ghost drifting in the dark. Still, she couldn't take her eyes off it. "Send a probe," she said softly. The probe detached from the ship's lower bay, a small bright spark gliding toward the massive structure. As it drew closer, the scale of the human ship became terrifyingly clear. It was enormous, large enough to carry an entire fleet inside it. The probe's camera sent back grainy footage. The corridors were dark, lined with strange symbols and long-forgotten flags. Frozen metal debris floated through the air. One of the crew members whispered, "It's like time stopped inside." The princess stared at the images. For some reason, she felt an ache in her chest, and not fear, but something deeper. It felt wrong to see such silence where there had once been life. Suddenly, the probe's signal glitched. Static filled the screen. "What happened?" she asked. "Unknown interference," the technician said quickly, hands flying over the controls. "Something's jamming it." Before anyone could respond, the static cleared. The camera flickered once more and showed something unexpected. A small light had turned on inside the ship. Just one. A narrow beam cutting through the darkness like an open eye. Everyone froze. Then the feed went black. The bridge was silent. The only sound was the low hum of the air systems. "Highness," said the captain quietly, "I recommend we leave this sector." This isn't right." She didn't move. Her gaze stayed on the dead ship. For a moment, she imagined the people who had once walked those halls. Human commanders, engineers, explorers. People who had dreams, laughter, fear. "What if they're still out there?" she said. The captain frowned. "Even if they are, they've had centuries to rebuild. We don't know who they've become." She looked down at her reflection in the console's glass. "Neither do we," she whispered. The council demanded an immediate retreat once they learned what her fleet had discovered. They didn't want more investigation. They didn't want questions. But questions had already taken root in her heart. She stayed quiet during the return journey, though her thoughts were restless. The ancient human ship haunted her mind. The faded letters, the silent corridors, the single light that had turned on. It all felt like a message. But what message? She replayed the footage again and again, searching for details. At the edge of one frame, just before the probe's signal cut out, she noticed something strange. An emblem, partially torn, still fixed to the wall. It looked like a star surrounded by wings. Under it were the words, "We endure." Those words struck her deeply. They didn't sound like the motto of a defeated people. They sounded like a promise. That night, as her ship drifted quietly through the starlit void, she sat by the window, her thoughts far away. Maybe the humans hadn't vanished at all. Maybe they had simply withdrawn, rebuilding, waiting, watching, and maybe one day soon they would return. She looked out at the stars, her reflection faint in the glass. She wondered how it would feel to meet them, to look into the eyes of a species her ancestors once betrayed. Would they forgive, or would they remember? The stars didn't answer, but the silence around her felt different now. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt like a pause, like the universe was holding its breath. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of known space, a human warship drifted with purpose. Old, scarred, and waiting, and though the princess didn't know it yet, their paths were already set to cross, not by choice, but by fate. The stars looked peaceful that morning, but everyone on the ship could feel the tension in the air. It was quiet, too quiet. Every person on the bridge moved carefully, speaking only when necessary. The scans had been running non-stop since the discovery of the old human warship. But what they found next was something no one could explain. The signal they had detected earlier was gone. It had disappeared overnight, as if the ship they'd found had never existed. No debris, no trace, just empty space. The crew checked the instruments again and again, certain there had to be an error. But everything was normal. The mysterious vessel, the one marked with the letters UNSV, had vanished. The princess stood at the front of the bridge, looking out through the wide viewing window. Her reflection stared back, calm on the surface, but her mind was racing. She didn't believe in ghosts, but what else could explain it? A ship that size couldn't just disappear. The captain cleared his throat softly. "Highness, it's possible the object was never there. It might have been a projection, a trick of the sensors." She didn't turn around. "A trick doesn't leave real coordinates," she said quietly. The captain hesitated. "Then what do you believe it was?" She thought for a moment, then said, "A warning." No one replied. The hum of the engines filled the silence. Later, she sat alone in her private quarters, staring at the faint blue glow of the data screen. She replayed the last seconds of the probe footage, the static, the flicker, that single light turning on inside the ship. She had watched it 100 times, and still, she couldn't understand why it felt so personal. It wasn't just discovery, it was connection. Something about that ship felt alive. Her thoughts were interrupted when the ship's alarm sounded, not loud, but sharp enough to make her heart jump. She rushed to the bridge. The crew was already at their stations, scanning the nearby void. "Report," she said quickly. "Unknown signature approaching," the technician said. "Long-range sensors picking up movement. Massive object. No transponder. How far?" 6 million kilometers and closing." The room went silent. 6 million kilometers in deep space wasn't far at all, not at the speed starships traveled. "Can we identify it?" she asked. "Not yet. The signature doesn't match any known design. It's irregular. That word never meant anything good." "Put it on the main screen," she said. The blackness ahead shimmered slightly. Then a faint glint appeared, like a reflection catching sunlight. Slowly it grew larger, clearer, until its outline filled the center of the display. Gasps rippled across the room. It was another ship, larger than any Lissari design. Its hull was dark, covered in deep scars and glowing lines of faint blue light. The shape was unfamiliar, angular, heavy, built for battle. It wasn't drifting like the last one. This one was alive. Is it transmitting? She asked. Negative, said the technician. No signals, no identification, but it's locking sensors on us. Locking. Yes, Highness. It's scanning us right now. Her stomach tightened. Shields up. The captain gave the order, and a soft hum filled the air as energy barriers wrapped around their fleet. On the screen, the strange ship kept moving closer. It didn't accelerate or slow down. It simply glided forward with impossible grace. The princess leaned closer, studying the details. The hull markings were faint, but she recognized the same pattern as before, that same human design language. It's one of them, she whispered. Her words hung in the air like a storm about to break. The captain turned to her. Highness, we need to retreat. Whatever that is, it's not responding and it's too close. But she didn't move. She felt frozen, caught between awe and fear. The ship on the screen looked almost alive, its dark metal breathing light, its engines burning with deep blue fire. Try to hail them, she said finally. The communication officer nodded and sent a wideband message. Unidentified vessel, this is Lysari Patrol Fleet requesting identification. You are entering restricted territory. Please respond. The words echoed softly across the bridge. No reply, only static. They tried again. Still nothing. Then the static changed. For a brief second, a faint voice came through, broken, distorted, but unmistakably human. Stay back. Warning. Under reclamation. The sound vanished just as quickly as it came. No one moved. No one breathed. The technician looked pale. Highness. That voice. I heard it, she said quietly. Play it again. They did, but the message was too broken to make sense beyond a few words. Still, the tone was clear. Calm, steady, and human. What does reclamation mean? One of the younger officers asked. No one answered. The captain finally spoke. Highness, permission to fall back. We cannot risk. Before he could finish, the human ship's engines flared. It turned slightly, and for the first time its full scale became clear. It was enormous, dwarfing their flagship. The Lysari ships looked like insects in comparison. Distance? She asked. 3 million kilometers. Closing fast. Hold position, she ordered. Highness, hold position. The room went silent again. Everyone waited. The massive vessel slowed until it stopped a short distance away. For a long, terrible moment, it did nothing. The tension was unbearable. Then lights flickered along its hull. Not weapons, just a pattern, slow and deliberate as if signaling. The bridge tried to decode it, but the meaning was unclear. Suddenly, every system on the Lysari flagship flickered. Lights dimmed. Consoles glitched. The power readings spiked for a moment before stabilizing again. What just happened? Unknown energy field, said the technician. It didn't attack us, it just scanned everything. Everything? Yes, our weapons, engines, life support, all of it. The princess stared at the screen. The human ship remained still, watching them silently. Are we in danger? She asked. The captain looked uneasy. If it wanted to destroy us, Highness, we wouldn't be standing here. He was right. The ship had power far beyond their understanding. Whatever technology it used, it was beyond anything the Dominion had ever seen. Minutes passed. Then the human ship transmitted one final message. Short and clear this time. Do not follow. Do not interfere. This region is under Terran control. The words echoed across the bridge. Terran, the ancient name for Earth. Before anyone could respond, the human ship turned away, its engines glowing brighter. In a flash of light, it vanished into the void. Silence filled the bridge again. The princess felt her knees weaken slightly. The crew looked at her, waiting for orders, but she couldn't find the right words. All she could think about was that voice, calm, steady, human. They hadn't attacked. They hadn't threatened. They had only warned. For a long time, no one spoke. The captain finally broke the silence. What now, Highness? She looked out at the stars, her voice quiet but firm. We report what we've seen, and we wait. Humanity has returned, and I think they have a purpose. As the fleet turned back toward Dominion space, the princess stayed by the window. The stars drifted slowly past, and her reflection seemed smaller than ever. She wondered if the humans had seen her, if they had looked at her ship and remembered what her ancestors had done centuries ago. She whispered softly to herself, "They didn't destroy us. That means they remember mercy." The stars gave no answer, but she could feel something shifting deep inside her. The fear was still there, yes, but now it was mixed with something else. Respect. Somewhere, beyond the edge of known space, the humans had reappeared, stronger, silent, watching, and this time, the galaxy would not be ready for them. The princess turned away from the window, the hum of the engine steady behind her. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew one thing for certain: the age of silence was over. The journey back to the Dominion felt longer than ever. The princess sat quietly in her command chair, her eyes fixed on the stars outside the viewing deck. They looked the same as before, silent, beautiful, endless, but she no longer saw them as she once did. Something had changed. The universe didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt awake. Her crew moved carefully, whispering when they spoke, as if afraid that even their voices might draw attention. The memory of that massive human ship still haunted them all, its silence, its power, and the calm voice that had spoken across the void. No one could forget the words, "This region is under Terran control." Even now, they didn't fully understand what it meant. Terran, the ancient name for Earth. A name spoken only in history lessons, a symbol of a people long gone. Yet, here they were, alive again. The princess closed her eyes, replaying the moment in her head. That voice, calm, strong, almost sorrowfully, didn't sound like an enemy. It sounded like someone carrying the weight of history. Back in Dominion space, her report sent shockwaves through the council. They called an emergency session the moment her ship docked. She was summoned to appear before them immediately. The council chamber was vast, cold, and full of shadows. High-ranking officials filled the circular hall, their eyes fixed on her as she entered. Some looked angry, others afraid. The air felt heavy. The High Chancellor, an old man with silver hair and a voice that carried across the room, spoke first. "You claim to have made contact with humans?" She nodded calmly. "Yes, it was not a myth, not a remnant. They are alive," murmurs filled the room. Some of the council members exchanged uneasy glances. Others scoffed quietly as if refusing to believe. The Chancellor leaned forward. "And you're certain it was human? Not a copy, not a machine?" "I heard the voice myself," she said. "They spoke our language, old but clear. They warned us to stay away from their territory." "Warned you?" the Chancellor repeated, narrowing his eyes. "Then they are hostile." "No," she said softly. "They could have destroyed us." "They didn't." Her words echoed through the hall. The Chancellor's face tightened. "You disobeyed orders by staying in that sector. You risked the fleet's safety for a ghost story. Do you understand the danger you've brought upon us?" The princess took a deep breath. "I understand that something greater is returning and we are not ready for it." The room went silent. She continued, her voice steady but filled with quiet urgency. "We've told ourselves for centuries that humanity was gone, destroyed by their own wars. But the truth is, we never wanted to face what really happened. My own research found that large parts of our records were altered, deleted. Someone hid what we did." Gasps rippled across the chamber. "What are you suggesting?" the Chancellor asked sharply. She looked him in the eye. "That our ancestors were not the victims of the Great War. They were part of the cause. We betrayed the humans." The silence that followed was almost painful. Every eye in the room turned toward her. She continued, quieter now. "I found classified files buried in the archives. The Dominion once allied with humanity during the Coalition Wars. Together they fought the empires that tried to dominate the stars. But when the war dragged on, the Dominion turned on their allies. They destroyed human colonies. They erased their existence from history. And now," she paused, her voice trembling slightly, "now they've come back." The Chancellor slammed his hand on the table. "Enough! You speak of legends and conspiracy. You endanger our people with superstition." "It's not superstition," she said. "I saw their ship. I heard their voice. They know what we did." The council chamber erupted in whispers and arguments. Some called for calm. Others demanded immediate military action. The word war began to echo through the hall like a storm rolling in. The princess stood silently amid the chaos. She realized then how deep the fear ran. Not fear of the humans themselves, but of the truth. The Dominion had built its power on lies, and now those lies were crumbling. That night she sat alone in her quarters overlooking the city lights of the capital world. The towers shimmered like glass, peaceful and perfect, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that the ground beneath them was cracking. Her aide entered quietly, carrying a small tablet. "Highness, I have something you might want to see." He handed her the device. It contained a restricted message intercepted by long-range sensors. The data was incomplete, but the signal origin matched the one from the human ship. The message was brief, an automated broadcast repeating in a steady rhythm. Terran fleet activity. Ongoing reclamation. Non-interference advised. She stared at the words. Reclamation, she murmured. What are they reclaiming? Her aide looked uneasy. Territory? Lost colonies, maybe. Old human systems that we took after the collapse. She nodded slowly. Then they're not expanding. They're taking back what was theirs. The realization hit her like a wave. This wasn't conquest. It wasn't revenge. It was something far more powerful, justice. She leaned back, staring out the window again. In the distance, small ships drifted between the stars, their lights flickering softly. The universe felt smaller now. For the first time, she wondered how it must feel to be human, to lose everything and still come back stronger. A faint sound pulled her attention back to the tablet. Another fragment of the signal had decoded. It was a voice in soft human calm. Earth remembers. Her chest tightened. The next morning, the Dominion military began preparing for a possible encounter. Fleets were moved. Systems went into lockdown. Fear spread quickly. News of the princess's report leaked to the public, sparking panic. Rumors of human warships traveling through the void spread across every colony. But amid all the fear, there were whispers of something else too. Respect. Many in the younger generations grew up hearing stories of humanity's courage and defiance. They didn't see the humans as monsters. They saw them as the spark that once inspired the stars to dream. The princess could feel the same. Whenever she closed her eyes, she saw that ship again. Dark, silent, powerful, and patient. The humans weren't rushing to attack. They were watching, remembering. She wondered what their lives were like now. Did they rebuild Earth? Did they remember the betrayal? Or had they simply moved beyond it? As the nights passed, she couldn't stop thinking about one thing. The moment the human ship scanned their fleet but didn't fire. They could have ended it all, yet they chose not to. That single act meant more than any words. It meant restraint. It meant purpose, and maybe, just maybe, it meant hope. She decided she couldn't stay silent anymore. The council would never tell the truth, but she could. She began recording her own message, not to her people, but to whoever might be listening beyond the stars. This is the voice of the Lissari Dominion, she said quietly, her eyes on the stars outside her window. We know you are out there. We remember what was lost and we remember what we did. We are not the same as those who came before us. If you hear this, know that we do not seek war. We only seek understanding. She paused, unsure what else to say. Then she added, if Earth still remembers, tell them. So do we. She sent the transmission into the void, not knowing if anyone would ever hear it. But somehow she felt lighter afterward, as if a burden had lifted from her heart. The stars twinkled quietly outside, and she thought she saw one flicker slightly brighter than the others. She smiled faintly. Maybe, just maybe, someone was listening. What she didn't know was that far beyond the borders, hidden among the stars, the Terran fleet had already received her signal. Deep within the command bridge of a massive warship, a human officer watched the decoded message in silence. His expression was unreadable, calm, but thoughtful. He turned to his crew and said quietly, they remember, and then without another word, he ordered the ship to hold position. The stars remained silent, but something was changing, slowly, quietly, and inevitably. The humans had returned not to conquer, but to make the galaxy remember what they once tried to forget. And somewhere in the Dominion's capital, the princess felt a strange peace in her chest, as if the universe had finally exhaled. The truth was painful, yes, but it was real. And for the first time in centuries, the stars no longer felt so far away. The night the princess sent her message, the stars outside her window seemed to move slower. The silence of space felt heavier, almost expectant, as if the universe itself was waiting to hear what would happen next. Days passed, then weeks. The Dominion grew restless. Fear was spreading like wildfire. Every transmission from outer patrols was checked twice. Each faint signal was treated like an invasion alarm. The Council issued orders for immediate defense measures. Fleets were redeployed, shields upgraded, and distant colonies evacuated. but nothing came. No attacks, no invasions, only silence. The princess kept to herself most days, working late in her private chamber, studying the recovered fragments of ancient human data. The archives she had uncovered contained more than she first realized: old maps, scattered transmissions, even songs once broadcasted from Earth. Some of the recordings were damaged, but the voices were real. She listened to one late at night, an old lullaby sung by a woman, her voice soft and full of love. It spoke of blue skies, of home, of oceans that never ended. The princess closed her eyes and tried to imagine what that world must have been like before it all vanished. It was strange. The more she learned about humans, the less she feared them. They weren't just warriors or conquerors, as the Dominion stories claimed. They were dreamers, builders, people who fought for something greater than themselves. One evening, as she sat studying a damaged holomap of ancient Earth colonies, her aide entered hurriedly. "Highness," he said softly, "we've received a signal. It's from deep space, Sector 9, her heart skipped. "The same coordinates as before?" "Yes," he replied. "It's faint, but it matches the human encryption pattern." She rose immediately. "Patch it through." Moments later, the room's light dimmed and a faint, grainy image appeared in the air, not clear enough to show a face, but clear enough to reveal a human silhouette. A man's voice spoke, calm, steady, almost sorrowful. "Your message was received. The Terran fleet acknowledges your words." The princess stood frozen, her breath caught in her chest. The voice continued, "We remember what was done. We remember the silence that followed. For centuries we waited for a sign, not of surrender but of honesty. You've given that." Her eyes softened. "You're not here for war?" she asked quietly. The image flickered, the reply delayed. "We do not seek revenge," the voice said. "We seek truth. The records of the past were lost to both our peoples. Before we decide what comes next, we must understand what really happened." The transmission ended abruptly after that, leaving the room in silence. The princess turned to her aide. "Record everything. We need to preserve this. It's the first step." From that moment on, a fragile link was established between the Dominion and the Terrans. It wasn't open or official. It was quiet, secret, carried through deep space relays hidden from the Council. Over the following days, more fragments came through. Short transmissions, bursts of data, old logs from human ships, files the Dominion had erased centuries ago. Each message felt like a piece of history coming back to life. Through these exchanges, the princess began to see the full picture. Humanity's fall had not been their doing alone. It had been a betrayal. The Dominion and other empires, fearing human independence and their growing influence, had turned on them during the Great Alliance War. The humans had fought back, fiercely, but the betrayal was too deep, the numbers too great. When Earth finally fell silent, the victors rewrote history to hide their guilt. Now, the ghosts of that past had returned, not as conquerors but as witnesses. Late one night, the princess sat watching the stars again, replaying the Terran message. The words echoed softly in her ears. "We seek truth." Her aide entered quietly. "Highness, the Council is meeting again tomorrow. They plan to discuss mobilizing the Grand Fleet. They believe the humans are preparing for war." She turned sharply. "That's not true. The humans could have attacked already if they wanted to. They're waiting for us to respond peacefully." "The Council doesn't believe that," he said. "They're afraid. And when people fear what they don't understand, they attack." The princess stood and paced slowly. "Then I'll speak to them myself. They need to hear the truth, not stories twisted by fear." The next day, the council chamber was full again. News of the Terran signal had leaked, and the room buzzed with tension. As she entered, all eyes turned toward her. The High Chancellor spoke coldly. "You have been communicating with an enemy species without authorization. Do you realize the danger you've put us in?" "They are not our enemies," she said firmly. "They are survivors of a war we helped start." Gasps echoed around the hall. The Chancellor's voice rose. "You accuse our ancestors of treason and murder based on ancient fragments? Do you expect us to trust the word of a ghost?" The princess stepped forward. "I've seen their records. I've heard their words. They don't seek revenge. They seek truth. And they're offering us a chance to face it together." The Chancellor slammed his hand on the table. And what if that truth destroys the Dominion? What if it tears down everything we built? Then maybe it should, she said softly. The room fell silent. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. We've lived in comfort for centuries, believing we were the rightful heirs of the stars. But if that peace was built on lies, then it was never real. The humans deserve the truth, and so do we. The council didn't answer. The silence was long and heavy. Finally, the Chancellor spoke again, his tone bitter. You speak like one of them. Perhaps you've already betrayed us. The words cut deep, but she didn't flinch. If telling the truth is betrayal, then maybe betrayal is what this empire needs. That night, the princess was placed under surveillance. Her communications were restricted, her messages monitored. But she had expected that. Before the meeting, she had already arranged for the Terrans to receive everything. Every record, every file, every secret the Dominion tried to hide. She knew she was risking everything, her title, her freedom, even her life. But something inside her refused to let go of the hope that maybe this was the beginning of something better. Days later, as she sat quietly in her quarters, another signal came through. This time, clear and deliberate, the human voice spoke again, but now it carried something different, warmth. You've shown courage, it said, and honesty. That is the first step toward peace. Then came a new line of text, scrolling across her screen. Coordinates attached. Neutral ground. Meet us, her heart raced. She knew what it meant. They were inviting her, not as an enemy, but as a representative of the future. She didn't hesitate. Prepare the ship, she ordered her aide. We leave immediately. He looked worried. If the council finds out, they already will, she interrupted. But if we wait for their permission, we'll lose our chance. That night, her ship slipped quietly through the edge of Dominion space, cloaked and silent. The stars around them glittered like 1,000 distant eyes. Hours later, they arrived at the coordinates. The space ahead looked empty at first, just endless blackness. But then something moved. A massive shape emerged from the dark, slow, silent, and impossibly large. The same human dreadnought that had appeared weeks before. Its hull gleamed faintly with faint blue lights, each pulse steady like a heartbeat. The princess stood on the bridge, unable to speak. Even after seeing it once, the sight still took her breath away. Then, across the void, a small craft detached from the Terran ship and drifted toward them. They're sending a shuttle, her aide whispered. She nodded slowly. Prepare the docking bay. Minutes later, the human shuttle docked quietly with her ship. The airlock hissed open and soft light poured through. The princess stood waiting, her heart pounding, her mind racing with questions. A figure stepped out, a human wearing a dark uniform marked with the old Terran insignia. His face was calm, his expression unreadable, but his eyes carried centuries of history. Neither spoke at first. They simply stood there staring at each other, two beings from two worlds that once destroyed each other, now face to face again. Finally, the human broke the silence. You reached out when no one else dared. That means something. The princess took a slow breath. We can't change what happened, she said softly. But maybe we can decide what happens next. He nodded slightly. That's all we ever wanted. For a moment, the silence between them didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt peaceful. Outside the window, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The meeting had just begun, but the war that had haunted their ancestors for centuries might finally be ending. The air in the docking bay was quiet, almost sacred. The human stood only a few steps away from the alien princess. The weight of centuries of silence between them. Neither spoke at first. The hum of the ship's systems filled the stillness, steady and soft, like a heartbeat that had waited far too long to be heard again. The princess finally found her voice. I didn't think this day would ever come, she said quietly. The human gave a faint nod. Neither did we. His tone was calm, but behind his eyes there was something deeper. Not anger, not pride, but a heavy sadness that time hadn't erased. It was the look of someone who had seen too much and carried it all in silence. The princess studied him for a moment. He looked nothing like the monsters her history books had described. He looked human. Tired, yes, but real. You knew we'd find you eventually? She asked. He glanced toward the viewing glass where the stars shimmered in endless black. "We never hid," he said. "We just stopped answering." Her chest tightened at those words. "Because of what happened," he nodded slowly. "Because of what was done. When Earth fell, we lost everything. Cities, people, hope. But even after the war, what hurt most wasn't the loss when it was the silence. The way the galaxy pretended we never existed." She swallowed hard. "Our history says you destroyed yourselves." He turned to her, eyes sharp now. "That's what they wanted you to believe." She didn't look away. "I know the truth now. I've seen the files. The Dominion betrayed the humans during the Great Alliance War. You trusted us and we turned our weapons on you." The human said nothing. His silence said enough. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for what our people did." For a long time he didn't respond. Then slowly he exhaled. "The apology isn't for me," he said. "I wasn't alive then, but maybe it's a start for what comes next." He motioned toward the corridor. "Walk with me." She followed him through the quiet hallways of the human ship. The walls were lined with faint blue lights pulsing gently like veins of energy. It didn't feel like a warship, more like a floating memorial. Every few meters she saw engraved names etched into dark metal panels. Tens of thousands of them. "They were the ones who didn't make it," he said softly, noticing her gaze. "We keep their names close. Every ship in the Terran fleet carries a wall like this." She stopped for a moment, tracing her fingers near one of the panels. "Careful not to touch." "You remember every one of them," he nodded. "For us, forgetting would be the real death." They reached a wide chamber filled with a soft blue glow. In its center, a projection hovered, an image of an old blue-green planet turning slowly in space. Earth. The princess stared at it, mesmerized. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "It's home, still standing after everything. We rebuilt it." She looked at him in disbelief. "You mean Earth is alive?" He nodded. "It took centuries, but yes. The oceans returned. The sky cleared. We went back underground for a long time, rebuilding, learning, remembering. The stars called again, but this time we swore to be better, to never repeat what destroyed us before." Her eyes softened. "And now you've returned to the stars." He studied the hologram for a moment. "Not to conquer," he said. "To reclaim. To find what was taken when not land or power, but truth. We found ruins of our old colonies, half buried under other flags. We didn't erase them. We restored them. Because history belongs to everyone who lived it." The princess stood beside him, silent for a while. She understood now why their return had terrified the galaxy. Power wasn't what made humans dangerous, and it was conviction. "Why did you answer my message?" she asked. He turned to her. "Because you asked, not ordered. You reached out as a person, not a ruler. That hasn't happened in a long time." A faint smile crossed her lips. "Maybe we both got tired of pretending." He smiled too, a quiet, knowing look. They stood there for a long time, watching Earth turn slowly in the projection. Around it, old satellites drifted like ghosts of another age. Finally, she spoke again. "What happens now? The Council will never accept this peace. They'll see it as weakness. Then you'll need to be stronger than they are," he said. "Truth always demands someone willing to stand alone first." She looked down. "And if that someone fails?" "Then someone else will take their place," he said. "That's how it begins." His voice was steady, but the words carried warmth, the kind that comes from belief, not command. When she looked back at him, she saw something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. He turned back to the hologram and tapped the console. A new image appeared beside Earth, a map of the galaxy marked with faint blue lines. "The human territories. These are the worlds we're restoring," he explained. "We're not taking anyone's colonies. We're only claiming what's still ours, and inviting others to learn what was forgotten." She stepped closer. "You want to share this knowledge?" He nodded. "We can't change the past, but we can build something better if we stop hiding from it. We want the Dominion to see that." Her eyes searched his face. "You trust us enough for that?" He smiled faintly. "Not yet, but we want to." The words stayed with her, simple, honest, and real. Before leaving, he handed her a small metallic sphere, smooth and faintly glowing. "It's a fragment from the first Terran archive," he said. "It holds the original Declaration of Unity, signed before the wars began. Keep it safe. One day your people will need it." She held it carefully, the cool surface pulsing softly in her palm. "Why give this to me?" Because every story needs a voice willing to tell it right, he said. Maybe that voice is yours. She looked at the sphere, then at him. And if they refuse to listen? Then tell it to the stars, he said. They'll remember. The meeting ended not with a treaty or handshake, but with silence, the kind of silence that carries respect. When the princess returned to her ship, she felt both lighter and heavier at once. As her vessel pulled away, she looked through the viewport one last time. The human dreadnought remained still, silent, majestic. Its lights pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat fading into the distance. Back in Dominion space, chaos awaited her. The council accused her of treason. They demanded to know what had been said. She gave them only part of the truth. They offered peace, she said simply, and a chance to face what we've hidden. Her words divided the chamber. Some called for war, others for silence. But outside the halls of power, something else began to grow. Across the Dominion, people whispered about the humans, not as monsters, but as a people who remembered. A people who forgave. Weeks turned into months. Quiet talks began in hidden channels. Historians reopened sealed archives. Ordinary citizens started asking questions about what really happened during the Great War. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion began to doubt its own stories, and that doubt was the beginning of truth. One night, standing again by her window, the princess held the small glowing sphere in her hand. When she pressed it gently, a voice emerged, human, warm, full of life. This is the voice of Earth, it said. We are not conquerors. We are not gods. We are humanity, and we remember. Her eyes filled with quiet tears, not of sadness but of relief. Far beyond the Dominion's borders, deep in the endless dark, the Terran fleet continued its quiet journey, restoring, rebuilding, remembering. The stars no longer felt like battlefields. They felt like bridges, and somewhere between those distant lights an old wound began to heal. The humans had not come to destroy. They had come to remind the galaxy that even in the coldest silence there was still a voice worth hearing, a voice called humanity.